and I think it's worth addressing, is what does consistency mean? What does it mean? We talk about, you should be consistent. If you're not a business coach, but like a sports coach, and it's like, okay, well, let's be consistent on in the arena, on the floor, whatever the sport might be. As a parent, as a guardian, you're raising some kids. You're like, okay, well, you want to be consistent in this, that, and the third. But we often don't take the time to actually say, like, what exactly is consistency. It helps when you have kids or young ones around, because they're going to ask you, okay, what does that mean? For me, consistency simply means showing up as you promise. Consistency to me is showing up as you promise. You planned on showing up a certain way, you're going to go ahead and show up that certain way. Now, that might sound super simple, and it is simple. I think we get a little bit confused because we make it more complicated than it is, and we actually don't realize how much control or power we have over how we're consistent. When I started the show, again, 3.5 years ago, it was December of 2020. And when I started this show, sorry, it's 2020? Yeah, 2020. It's been quite a few years, so forgive me, right? You guys might know better than me. December of 2020, I started the show. And when I first started the show, it was 5 episodes a week, Monday through Friday. And if you've done any regular content, if you're a content creator like I am, if you have any type of media voice, you know that number is insane, especially for something that wasn't monetized yet. I didn't have sponsors. And I was actually putting money into it instead of actually getting money out of it, as to what's starting to happen today. About 3 or 4 weeks into it, I was really enjoying the process. All the episodes are online, so you're welcome to watch them at bringyourworth.tv after this discussion is done. After I did all that, I'd say I was in week 3. And I woke up one morning, got my kids settled and all that, because they were sheltering in place and they were still pretty young. So one of them hadn't even started school yet. And I was starting to do an episode, and I was like, am I going to be able to do this for the long haul? As I've talked about in recent episodes, I'm a business coach. I've coached hundreds of people at this point. And one of my favorite questions is, whatever you're doing right now, it's sustainable, or can you see yourself doing it a year from now? I'm recording this right now, and you're hanging out with me in May. So May of next year, if I did this particular process, would I be in good health? Would I be happy? Would I be sad? Would I be productive? Like, whatever outcome I want, is the system that I'm doing right now making sense for it? And I had that dawning on myself. I was just talking to myself, and I was 3 weeks into the show. I'd already done 15 episodes. So I think it was like that Thursday or Friday, I was about to do my 15th episode. And I was like, I don't think this is going to be sustainable. Not only from my own stamina, but also because, again, my kids are growing, their needs are going to change. Again, we were sheltering in place at the time, so we're doing the virtual schooling, which was a mess here in America. I think I can say that as a blanket statement. Everybody was trying to figure it out. We were in the midst of that. And being excited, I had the stamina to do that. And we'll get into that later on the show. The stamina to be consistent on that level, but I knew in the future that wasn't going to work out. And so it was a tough decision, because I was so loving connecting with y'all that often, every day. It was a nice routine with that. But then I was like, this isn't sustainable. So fairly quickly, I think the following week, I went from 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I was doing this exact same show, except it was recorded. And I went to 3 times a week. And you guys, old school guys have been, the veterans have been around for a little while, remember this was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I had that for almost 2 years, most of this period of time. And I realized I couldn't be consistent on that level and have a certain quality. And I was afraid I was going to burn myself out. Again, there's 400 episodes or so of this very program, and I'm just doing this on my own. So then I'd say the last 3 or 4 months, I scaled it back to one committed show, this one, live on every Wednesday at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. And then if I do extra shows during the week, it's like a treat for y'all, or I get inspired, or something happens, and I'll go and throw a bonus episode in there, which I love. I'm not promising more than I can actually deliver. As we say here in the States, particularly in the corporate world, you underpromise and you overdeliver. You underpromise and you overdeliver. So I think when we hear consistency, we think I have to hit this certain standard. I have to hit it every single time, which there's a whole swath of emotions about that we'll talk about later. But I have to hit this certain standard. I have to hit it at any time, and I can't vary from that. That's actually, I disagree with that. Consistency is saying, I will show up to y'all Wednesdays at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. If I'm not going to show up that time, I'll show a rerun or I'll give you guys a heads up and give you another episode. That's consistency. I can handle that. That fits my life right now, particularly since I'm doing, as I've talked about on the show recently, I'm doing a lot of work behind the scenes with ghostwriting and other things. I'm working on big projects over here for other folks. Like there's a lot of moving parts right now. And so me doing the show, as I did when I first started the show 3 years ago, doing it 5 days a week is unrealistic. It just, so I can be consistent, but what we often forget is that consistency is based on the commitments we make. I can make a commitment of being here, hanging out with y'all 1 day a week. 3 years ago, it was 5 days a week. But consistency can be based on what you can deliver. You actually successfully delivering what you said you were. To me, that's what consistency is. It's not some pie in the sky ideal standard. People or organizations that are consistent set the standard consciously, and they're honest about what they say no to. To me, that's consistency. Jump into the comments if you guys have another definition of consistency, but at least for me, I rock with that, and it definitely makes me feel peaceful when I think about that. So if you're feeling overwhelmed with the idea of being consistent, maybe you need to change your standard, and you have control over that. And even if other people expect you to be at a different standard, then that requires you having an honest conversation. But having that honest conversation, I've found, is better than holding yourself to a standard that doesn't fit you anymore, isn't realistic. And when you do that, then you're really not consistent, and you're going to end up letting them down, frankly, anyway. One of my favorite books that talks about this concept is The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. So you can tell it's got more, I got dog ears. It's got some watermarks, probably courtesy of my kids. That's my guess. But it's a beautiful, beautiful looking book. It weighs a couple pounds. It's well done. And it's really, really simple. Rick Rubin, best known as the co-founder of Def Jam, which was one of the first, definitely the first major mainstream all hip hop label. The first hip hop label would probably go to Sugar Hill. Shout out to Sylvia Robinson, back around the time I was born. But they weren't just dedicated to hip hop. And in fact, hip hop was barely around when they started. So of course, they're known for the Sugar Hill Gang, hence the name of the record label. Def Jam was the first one to take it to that level and become a billion-dollar company. To be clear, there will be no Def Jam without Sugar Hill Records. But Def Jam actually, I believe, was the first one to take it really, really mainstream. And we're talking LL Cool J, Slick Rick, Beastie Boys. It just keeps going. I can go Dane, like I can keep going down the rabbit hole since I'm a hip hop guy. But if you know your hip hop, you're familiar with his name. But after he left Def Jam, then he started producing on his own, and he went wild. We're going from Anthrax and the Red Hot Chili Peppers to the Dixie Chicks to Beck, I believe, all the way to, more of the modern hip hop, even working with, I'm trying to remember his name, Kanye West on a few of his major albums as of late. And the spectrum is wide. So we're talking about a guy that's been at the forefront of creativity for 40 years. I want to say Def Jam was 1982, 83. So what does that make it? Just over 40 years. So let's say 42 years. And this is his first book. And if you know anything about his work, he tends to be relatively reclusive. And so for him to put it in here, it's great. What I love about this, and yeah, he does practice different meditations, as you can tell. If you know your Buddhism and other things like koans, Koans, like what this represents. But it's almost like the creativity and the idea as a circle. Our main purpose is to be creative and to listen to those beautiful voices, whether you call them muses or inspiration, whatever, take your pick. but our thing is to show up regularly for it. That's our main intention. Shout out to Stephen Pressfield and another wonderful book behind me on my shelf, The War of Art. Similar concept. And so it's filled with little chapters. Trying to find one that's not tore up. It's like you tell I was getting into it. But we're talking about like 1-page chapters, 2-page chapters, very short, talking about how you can show up creatively, not creative, regularly creative. Creative means something else here in America, but regularly creatively. This is important because so many of y'all that I work with, so many of y'all that are watching the channel are trying to create something. Not just the artists and musicians and the writers like myself, but you're trying to create something out of nothing. As I said in my book, Bring Your Worth, you're creating something out of nothing. If you're doing that, you are making a creative act. Hence the name of it, a creative act, a way of being. We're all doing the same thing. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sacrificing our time or energy or putting our effort into making the world a different place. Like we wouldn't be doing that. You wouldn't be watching the show. So with that inspiration within you, you have to be consistent to make sure that it continues to flow. He talks about consistency in there. It's a really good book to kind of go ahead and sit with and play with. An episode from probably about a year and a half ago on the Bring Your Worth show is the best way to reach your goals, a step-by-step guide. It sounds intimidating, but the episode, I rewatched the episode recently because I think it's about 100 episodes ago, and it's only like 20 minutes long, but it's 3 different steps based on three different episodes from earlier in the show that talk about goal setting and being realistic with it, which again touches on what we talked about today, and finding a way to be consistent. Because if you're going to reach certain goals, you're not going to say, well, hopefully not. You can't just say, I'm going to be a billionaire, or I'm going to be a best-selling author, or whatever that big goal is. I'm going to be the best parent in the world, however you want to frame it. You can't just do that. It actually requires milestones. All right, so if I'm going to be the best parent possible, then that means that I need to know myself better. Because how I treat my kids is often reflective of my own level of emotional intelligence and my own, if you want to get psychological for a second, my own level of self-regulation and how I'm able to organize and not control, but understand my emotions. And that's going to affect all my relationships, particularly with my kids. Okay, well then it starts with that. It's like, well, how do I learn about myself more? Okay, well, let's take a step back. Well, how can I do that? And then you keep going backwards and backwards. So really, if you're going to go ahead and go to the next level, then of anything, then you need to do the goal setting. And so even what we're talking about as far as you being more consistent or me being more consistent, we have to go a little bit deeper and find out why that consistency isn't happening in the first place. And that requires these different milestones. So even though goal setting might sound a little bit weird when it comes to consistency, to me, they're one and the same. And if you know that like that, then it makes it hard. And exactly. Consistency and being brave enough to pivot when needing to adjust your commitment. Exactly. Thank you. And that's a lot right along the lines of what I just said. So it's like, you know that it's too much. And it's a question of, or even if you think it might be too much, you ask yourself, can I keep this up? And the answer should not be an automatic yes. It should be, I can keep it up for a little while. Maybe that's your consistency. Maybe you do a show like mine or a project that's in your realm. And you say, I can do work on this project for 3 months. And then the project is done. Wherever it's at, I'm going to ship it. I could say, hey, as soon as I hit episode 400 later on this summer, then this show is done. Thank you. And that's fine too, because I showed up consistently based on who I am and what I have available at the time. But it requires that kind of honesty. And thank you for the comment. And so with the goals, that's part of that energy to say, all right, what am I available to do right now? What am I capable of? That's really important. And then a recent episode, actually an episode that came out, again, also around a year ago, but I highlighted recently on the show, is Brene Brown on how to slow down your business without losing it. And I talked about this, I want to say a couple of episodes ago. It might have been the slowdown episode from last week. So the link is right below. I just mentioned the episode, but the episode that ran a week ago, not a year ago, a week ago, where Brene Brown realized she was burning out. And then she was like, I need to shut things down for the rest of the summer. And so the preparation she went into doing that, but also the reason why I know she was burning out and that I know that she took a break was because she told us. And she had as a beautiful, social media post. I think she had some newsletters too that came out and said, hey, I'm going to take a break because I'm done. I'm juggling 2-3 different podcasts. I have a new book that just came out. I think Atlas of the Heart that just came out, which is her latest book. All that stuff. She's like, I need a break. I'm going to lose myself in this. So she took a break. And, similar to the comment, it's like, if you know that you need to pivot, then one of the best things you can do is actually be honest about that. But to be honest about that, you have to be honest with yourself. Because how can you communicate that you're pivoting or that you too much or that you're overwhelmed to somebody else if you're not honest and have a clear line of communication with yourself to do so? Big food for thought there. Again, thanks for the comment. All right, so today we're talking about, what are we talking about? My technology is like, hey, we're not moving that fast. We're talking about not accepting your shadow. That was a couple weeks ago. We're talking about simple ways to be consistent. And part of being consistent, again, is being willing to make mistakes and also being able to reel back your commitments based on you being able to show up consistently for them. Sometimes it's too much, and we have to be willing to admit that to ourselves before we can actually support that. At the end of the day, all we're talking about is relationships, because when it comes to consistency, you can be consistent for yourself, but where really the rubber meets the road is making commitments to other people, because they're ideally going to hold you to it. So how can you hold yourself to that too?